This is my video update on this Monday morning, December the 25th. Merry Christmas, everybody. Let's talk about some news. And let's start things off with a little color revolution unfolding in Serbia, an attempted color revolution that took place yesterday in Serbia. About 2,000 people. They went on to one of the main squares in Belgrade. These are supporters, activists for the party Serbia for Violence. No, sorry, Serbia Against Violence. But boy, did they get very violent yesterday. And I believe that's the square where the parliament is located. So I've been to Serbia a bunch of times, and I believe the parliament was on one side, and then you have a big square, and you have a bunch of administrative buildings. Let me know if I'm wrong, people that are watching this from Belgrade. But I recognize that building that was in the background from some of the video and some of the images from the events that took place yesterday evening. So this is the party that lost the elections to the incumbent party and the incumbent president, Mr. Vučić. And Vučić came out with a statement, and he said that there was indeed a color revolution attempt, but he said it's going to fail. And the police came in and they dispersed the crowds. I think there was something like 35 arrests, but it got violent. I mean, they broke a lot of windows, a lot of the steps were all busted up, and they were like trying to smash through the doors of the administrative buildings in the square in Belgrade. And basically, this is the party that came in second place, from what I understand. This Serbia for Violence party, Serbia Against Violence party. They're very pro-EU, pro-West, pro-NATO. I don't know if they're anti-Russian, but I imagine that's baked in the cake when you're very pro-EU, pro-NATO, pro-West. I imagine you have to be anti-Russian. But I've actually read some commentary which says that the Serbia Against Violence is not anti-Russian. They're just pro-collective West. I don't know how that works. But they want a do-over in the elections, specifically in the city of Belgrade. They feel like they won the elections in the city of Belgrade. They want a do-over. There were Serbian flags at the protests. There were also your standard EU flags as well. You always have to have the EU flags waving when you're trying to get a color revolution going. But I don't think any of this is going to work out. Vučić seems to have everything under control. Now, look, Vučić, he's a pretty controversial figure. He's in Serbia. I always describe him as a middle-of-the-road type of guy. Middle-of-the-road type of leader. He reminds me a lot of, like, I want to say Lukashenko back in the day. But, he's not against NATO, the EU, the collective West. Actually, he's very pro-EU, NATO, the collective West. But he's also pro-Russia, China, BRICS. Now, some people say he's 50-50, and he plays both sides off against each other like Lukashenko used to do. Remember Lukashenko like 8 years ago? That was what Lukashenko in Belarus was like. He was making deals with the collective West, with the EU. Then he was making deals with Russia. Then he would piss off Russia. Then he would piss off the EU. And he was, playing both sides against each other, off against each other. And I think Vučić is that type of guy. But there are a lot of people in Serbia, a lot of analysts, who say that Vučić he's not 50-50. He's more like 80% pro-collective West, or even 90% pro-collective West, and just 10, 20% he's pro-BRICS, Russia, China. But look at all of this. Wow. Wow. Amazing, huh? But, whatever the breakdown is, whether he's 50% East-West, whether he's 80% West, and he's just 20% BRICS, Russia, even if he's 95% pro-EU, pro-collective West. The problem that Vučić has with the collective West is that they don't do 90%. There's people swimming today. The collective West, they don't do 95%, 99%. They demand 100% compliance. The EU ideology, the collective West ideology, the green religion, the globalist religion, it demands 100% compliance. If you're not 100% compliant, you have to go. That's just how it works. Remember Sebastian Kurz in Austria? He was the Chancellor of Austria, young guy, very, very dynamic leader, very young guy, and he was a globalist. I mean, he was part of like the globalist elite crowd, but he was like 10%, 20% of his policies were anti-globalist. He would put Austria first on many issues. And the EU, they were like, no, Mr. Kurz, no, that's not how we work. And they got rid of him. They had like this sting operation, I think in like Ibiza, and they had some girls there or something. I don't even know. I don't even remember what it was. I remember on the Duran we covered it, but I forgot what went down. But it was like this sting operation that they set up in Ibiza, and there were some girls there who said that his party, it wasn't even him, that his party was financing Russians or something like that, and the girls weren't even Russian. They were like one of the girls that was taking this money to run media psyops was like from Lithuania or something. Anyway, they got him gone. They got him out because he wasn't 100% compliant. Look at Poland. This is a great example. Poland. You had Law and Justice. Law and Justice was fully on board with NATO, fully on board with U.S. military bases in Poland, war against Russia. Law and Justice was like, let's go. Let's march towards Moscow. Let's do it. I mean, Law and Justice was on board with all of the neocon stuff. I mean, they were surpassing the neocons. That's how committed Law and Justice was to all of that stuff. But when it came to social issues, that's when Law and Justice would buckle. When it came to the social issues, Law and Justice was like, no, we can't go there. And so the European Union and the globalists, they said, time to bring back Tusk. So that's what they did. They brought back Tusk. And what's Tusk doing? He's making his whole cabinet woke. Like his whole cabinet is a bunch of like woke activists. What's his name? Sikorsky, the guy that tweeted "Thank you USA" when Gilligan and the skipper on the Andromeda blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. That guy, Sikorsky, the guy that was in Kiev during the coup in 2014. He was foreign minister for Poland back then, and he was part of the whole Yanukovych coup. He's now back as foreign minister, from what I understand. So Tusk, he's in power now, and he didn't even win the election. His party didn't even win the election. They came in second place, but they formed a coalition. They formed a government. He's super pro-EU. He's in power now, and he's 100% compliant to the globalist ideology, 100%. He's like dismantling the state media companies because their employees were law and justice. They were on board with law and justice, so he's firing everybody in the state media, and he's putting his guys in there. And Duda, the president of Poland, he's not approving the budget because he's saying that Tusk is acting. I don't even know if he's saying illegally, but he's like, Tusk can't fire all of these people that are working in the state media companies. What he's doing is wrong, so I'm not going to approve the state budget. And there's this whole argument now going on in Poland. But my point in all of this is Vučić may be on board with the globalist project. He may be on board with NATO. He may be on board with their plans for Kosovo. I don't know. People in Serbia, let me know in the comments down below. He may be on board with Serbia going into the EU. He may be on board with Serbia joining BRICS. But the point with Vučić is that he's not 100% compliant to the globalists. So the globalists were like, nope, we gotta regime change this guy. We got to color revolution this guy out of office. And so that's what happened yesterday, in my opinion. That's what's going on. It seems like it's a pretty weak attempt to remove Vučić. But we'll see. We'll see if this thing has momentum, if this thing has legs and protests occur every day or every week. Then it could snowball into something problematic for Vučić. I guess it depends on the funding that's available to these groups. The globalist Soros funding that goes into the EU, globalist Soros funding that goes into these groups that want to remove Vučić or that want a do-over to the elections, right? Because the EU, it's never democracy for the EU unless they win. If they win, it's democracy. If they lose, then it's not democracy. And maybe the elections were rigged. I don't know, but whether they were rigged or not rigged, for the EU, democracy only happens when they win. That's it. Then it's democratic and fair. If they lose, well, something happened and we have to have a do-over or we have to, put people out onto the streets. So we'll see what will happen in Serbia. From what I understand, the Prime Minister of Serbia, she actually came out with a statement and said that Russia tipped off Serbia to what was about to happen. That was an interesting statement. She said that the Russian intel told Serbia that a color revolution is about to go down. And from what I understand, the Vučić government even said that something was about to happen, and a lot of people in Serbia, or a lot of government officials in Serbia, from what I understand from her statement, they were like, oh, this is Russian disinformation. This is nonsense. We're not going to have protests. Things aren't going to get violent. And sure enough, that's what we had happen yesterday. So, in much the same way that the Russians bailed out Erdogan when they tried to remove him. This was back in like 2000. When was that? 2016. And they almost got Erdogan. They almost got him. From what I understand, they had his plane. Like the military, they had his plane in sight and they could have shot it down, but the pilots decided not to, and Erdogan escaped. Something like that happened, but it was Russia that tipped off Erdogan. And so you had Russia, from what the Prime Minister of Serbia says, it was Russia that tipped off Serbia about this color revolution that's about to take place. Anyway, since we're on the topic of regime change, it looks like the collective West, the US, EU, NATO, their plan for Russia is going to be regime change. Now that Russia's going to have an election in March, which is not far off, only 2.5 months away, we're going to have Russian elections. And it looks like the game plan for the collective West is to try and get some sort of a regime change going. So remember the article that I talked about the other day from the Times UK, which interviewed some parliament members from Ukraine, and one of the guys said that the only way we can win this conflict is if we get regime change in Moscow. Remember that article? Well, the New York Times, in the article that they put out yesterday, which claimed that Putin wants a ceasefire, that he's open to a ceasefire. The New York Times article actually talked about an anti-war movement being built in Russia ahead of the elections in 2024, and how Putin is worried that this anti-war movement is going to grow and it's going to damage him before the elections. And I found that interesting, that they were talking about an anti-war movement and how it's just bubbling up right now, and Putin's concerned about this anti-war movement as he heads towards the elections in 2024. Not that he's worried about losing, but that he's worried about his legacy and his reputation if he starts getting protests and if people pour onto the streets and if this anti-war movement gains momentum. Putin's worried about how this looks for his reputation. And that's why Putin is now using diplomatic back channels to try and get a ceasefire, to try and freeze the conflict. So that had me very, very suspicious, actually, that statement, that reporting from the NYT. And then you have the story about Yekaterina Duntsova. Now, I mentioned her maybe 2 weeks ago. She's this journalist who said that she's going to run for president, and I believe it was the Times, I think it was the Sunday Times or the Telegraph that had a profile on her, that had like a dedicated report on Yekaterina Duntsova, and they said that she's the one that's going to challenge Putin, and how she's very brave for going up against Putin, and she's running on an anti-war platform. She wants to stop the war. That's her main platform that she's running on. And this was like 2-3 weeks ago, and the UK media ran a story on her. They profiled her. And during my video, I was like, who is this person? I've like never heard of her. Maybe she's very popular in Russia. I don't know. Maybe she's a very popular journalist, but I've never heard of her. And all of a sudden, the UK media is saying that she's going to be the main challenger to Putin. Well, yesterday we got stories that Yekaterina Duntsova is not eligible to run for president because, according to Russian officials, she messed up her paperwork, her filing to run for president, and so she's not eligible. And the Collective West media, they really picked up on this. The BBC, they ran a story, Russia bans anti-war candidate from challenging Putin. CNBC, they read an article, anti-war challenger Duntsova barred from running against Russia's Putin. New York Post, they read an article, anti-war candidate Yekaterina Duntsova barred from running against Putin in election. They all pretty much have the same title. And all of the Collective West media, they're running now with the narrative that she was a legitimate, popular anti-war candidate, and Putin has blocked her from challenging him in the presidential elections. And then you have Blinken tweeting out 2 days ago, on the 23rd of December, we are deeply concerned about the whereabouts of Alexei Navalny, who has now been missing in Russia's prison system for nearly 3 weeks. We once more call for his immediate release and an end to the continued repression of independent voices in Russia. Interesting timing for Blinken's tweet. There are reports that Navalny was moved to a different prison or something like that, and he hasn't spoken to his lawyers in like a week or two. But I think something more is going on. By the way, I wonder if Blinken, he's very concerned about Navalny. I wonder if he has the same concern for American citizen Gonzalo Lira being held by the Zelensky regime for 10 months now. I wonder if Blinken has ever tweeted about Gonzalo Lira. Hey, Blinken, have you tweeted about Gonzalo Lira and your concern about Gonzalo Lira? Have you put out a tweet saying we are very concerned about American citizen Gonzalo Lira being held by the Zelensky regime? We demand his immediate release. I don't think we've seen that tweet, but Blinken's very concerned about Russian citizen Alexei Navalny. He's very concerned about Russian citizen Alexei Navalny, who's really not that popular in Russia. I mean, he polls at like 0.002% or something like that. At his height of popularity, like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when he was a public figure in Russia, he was polling at like maybe 1%, like Chris Christie levels, you know. But he's much more popular in the West. Like he's super duper popular in the West, even though he's like a nationalist. Like this guy's like far right nationalist. That's like his ideology. For some reason, the neo-libs, they love him. Go figure. But I found that interesting that that Blinken tweeted out about Navalny a couple of days ago. And then you had a statement from Borrell. Borrell made this statement. He said that Russia has never been able to become a nation. It was always an empire with a Tsar, with the Soviets, and now with Putin. It is a constant of Russia and its political identity, and as a result, a threat to its neighbors, and particularly to us. So now you have Borrell pretty much saying that Russia needs regime change. It's a threat to us, and it's never been a nation. We need to deal with this country, with this civilization called Russia. We need to regime change it and break it up. That's pretty much what Borrell is hinting at. So you have all of these things going on. Duntsova, Yekaterina Duntsova. You have the New York Times talking about an anti-war movement. You have the Times of London talking about the only hope for Ukraine to win the conflict is regime change. You have Blinken talking about Navalny. The U.S. is going to give regime change another go. That's what they're going to do. And that is their only hope. When you think about it, their only chance is regime change. I mean, we've come full circle. The conflict in Ukraine, the proxy war against Russia, was about regime change. And 2 years later, we've come back to regime change. So, you know, over the next 2 months, they're going to make a big push, I think, to try and get people out onto the streets, like what you saw in Serbia, in Belgrade, to try and get people out onto the streets, to try to weave the narrative that the elections in Russia are rigged and Putin's a dictator, he's an autocrat, he's suppressing Yekaterina Duntsova, he's done this to Navalny, and they're going to try to put something like this together, because what's the only strength that the U.S. now has left, that the collective West now has left? NATO has been defeated and humiliated. Ukraine has been defeated. The dollar, well, we know what's happening with the dollar. Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, all the whole global South, the whole rest of the world is moving away from the collective West. But the one thing that they still do well is narrative creation, narrative construction, and information war. So I think they're going to rely heavily on that. They're going to rely heavily on the information war and the narrative construction to see if they can somehow, before the March 2024 election, if they can somehow make it so that they cause trouble for Putin. And then if they can cause enough trouble for Putin, they're probably hoping that Putin will say, all right, enough already. You promised to get the people off the streets, and I'll agree to a ceasefire. I think they're kind of hoping for that, the hope strategy. But we've come full circle to regime change. And the UK defense minister, actually, he came out with a statement, and he said, the West cannot afford to lose to Russia in Ukraine, since the world is one step away from entering the era of autocracy. There is no price we would not be willing to pay today to prevent disaster tomorrow. That's what the UK Defence Minister, Mr. Shapps, said. Grant Shapps. No price is too high to back Ukraine against Russia, according to the Sunday Times. That is what the UK Defence Minister said. No price is too high. I don't know. I think that if Shapps really means what he says and no price is too high, like really? No price? No price is too high, Mr. UK Defence Secretary? Do you mean that? Well then, pack your bags and go to the front line, dude. I mean, what do you want me to say? You're telling us no price is too high, really? Lead by example. Lead by example. All right. So, more mobilization news coming out of Ukraine. We have reports which claim that the Ukraine military is now going to send text messages to people in order to get them to go to the front lines. They're going to use text message. This is what the defense minister of Ukraine said during an interview. Ukraine announces smartphone conscription notices. Everyone may end up getting a call, including those who left the country, the defense minister said. And Zelensky the other day, he said in a statement with regards to a peace agreement with Russia, he said, if such a moment comes, if we are forced to sign peace agreements with the enemy, then the day before that, I will resign as president. With me, Ukraine will not lose. That's Zelensky logic for you. Right before the peace agreement's about to be signed, 24 hours before signing the peace agreement, Zelensky in his teeny tiny brain, he is saying, you know what? I'll just resign as president. I'll take my money, and I'll go live in one of my homes in London or Miami or Los Angeles, and that means that I didn't lose the conflict. That's Zelensky logic. I didn't lose the conflict. I won the conflict. It was the guy that came after me, that signed the peace agreement. That's the one. That's the guy that lost the conflict, not me. I didn't lose conflict. I won conflict. Now I live in Los Angeles. I'm hanging out with Clooney and Brad Pitt and Jolie. So yeah, that's Zelensky logic for you. All right, let's do a clown world, and we can wrap this video up. So Rand Paul, he put out a report called his 2023 Festivus report, and he details all of the government spending, the wasteful U.S. government spending, which this year amounted to $900 billion. Rand Paul's annual Festivus report reveals $900 billion wasted on insane federal projects. And it's a huge list of projects that went into this $900 billion in wasteful spending. Stuff like, I'm trying to remember, there was like programs where the government wanted to see how monkeys run or how monkeys sleep or something like that. There was money given to people that were using like Barbie pictures for ID, like relief money, pandemic relief money for people with Barbie photo IDs. There was money spent on like musicians or rap stars that are no longer popular to like rehabilitate them, to get them popular again, programs like that. Really weird stuff. But all of it amounted to $900 billion in waste. That's Rand Paul's 2023 Festivus report. Anyway, that's the video, everybody. TheDuran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and Twitter X. Duran Shop, 20% off. Use the code Christmas20. Merry Christmas, everybody. Take care.